So what you're saying is basically just to come back, you're saying so just to bring all of that together, just so that I understand you, you're saying that Crowley basically traveled to the east. He basically either was initiated or witnessed, observed a whole bunch of these rituals, and then brought it back, and then kind of like interpreted these Eastern belief systems in a Western esoteric fashion, and then created a system around it. Essentially, that's what you're saying. So it's not actually like you're saying, well, it's not actually like through a system of 19th century Hermetic symbols, which were created by Crowley. You're saying actually Crowley borrowed most of these ideas from other people. They were already pre existing, legitimate concepts that he basically took and essentially pirated and created his own pirate religion essentially out of these stolen pieces, these looted aspects of other religions. He's basically doing metaphysical cherry picking because, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. Some people say, oh, you're not allowed to take the best ideas from all different groups and put them together, whatever. I would disagree that he took the best ideas. I would say he took very mid ideas, and that's why the religion appeals to people who are not enlightened. It appeals to people who are seeking enlightenment because it attempts to bring them into their herd. So it's very funny how, to me personally, how Crowley calls Nietzsche a prophet, and Nietzsche says the soul is a fiction. Right after the death of God, the soul, it doesn't matter. Like all this bullshit, all these rituals, all this occultism, all of the words of the priest are merely a will to power. Everything Crowley says is actually not true because God is dead and we killed him with science, with Darwin. That was the argument that Nietzsche doesn't, people don't talk about this. People don't understand the nuances of what Nietzsche was really talking about. Nietzsche, at the time period he existed, it was the Darwinian revolution was just taking place. So humanity had been, as I said earlier in my introduction, humanity has been removed from its privileged, exceptional place within the human superstructure, and it is now, we are on the same level as the animals. That's why I said we are pond scum. I prefer the term actually primordial soup, but in general, the reality is that what Nietzsche describes is that Darwin killed God. It wasn't actually Nietzsche, it was us. We killed God, and we killed God with modern science. So the concept, and he's talking about it metaphysically. This isn't a literal like murder of a god. This is like actually the concept that Nietzsche is saying is that Darwin actually, not Nietzsche, although Nietzsche is the Antichrist in his personal belief system, but it's not the way that people think. He's not talking about himself as a Jewish Hebrew Antichrist. He's talking about himself as a Greek Homeric Antichrist, completely different than the system that you would believe, that you think of, right? So I don't even have time to go into what Nietzsche actually believed because I could spend 3 hours on it essentially. But the truth is that like Nietzsche believed that the soul, all of this occultism was essentially a fiction because God was dead, okay? And metaphorically. And therefore, Crowley, to believe in Crowleyisms, to believe in the Crowleyan soul or the true will is to call your own prophet a liar. And we killed him. He said, God is dead and we killed him. And what he was specifically referring to was Darwin to a degree, because he talked about how basically Darwin performed a similar act. Well, this is my interpretation. This isn't what he said. My interpretation is that basically in the old Greek days, right, the Homeric heroes were in charge, and then when the philosophers came, the philosophers recognized that the Greeks had already lost the spirit of Athens. They had already lost the Homeric heroes. So that the philosophers showing up was a sign that the end times were at hand, essentially, right? So basically what I'm saying is that, what? Yeah. And I was gonna say what. Oh yeah, go. I was gonna finish, but I had something else to add to that. I was gonna say Darwin is literally Socrates of the modern era because Darwin used science to destroy God, and Socrates used philosophy to destroy religion, or at least the religion of the state of Athens. You know what I mean? Because he showed everyone's an idiot. And Darwin basically did the same thing. Darwin basically showed that most of the religious types have a fundamentally flawed and limited understanding of biology and evolution, and that these things are real. And I believe in evolution, but I also believe that it's possible that evolution is some type of evidence of intelligent design on some high spiritual or metaphysical or alien or whatever level. So that's a whole nother discussion. But in terms of the belief systems that we had pre and post Darwinian era are so fundamentally different. It's like night and day. So you have to understand the world that Nietzsche and Aleister Crowley inhabit is a completely different world to the world that Plato and Socrates inhabited. And you could argue that even the world of Plato and Socrates, they had already lost the Homeric heroes and they had already lost the Greek je ne sais quoi, that they already had lost it before the philosophers had even showed up. So people like me showing up in society means that society is already doomed.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I don't think it's so critical that Crowley and Nietzsche agree on everything. I think it's more like probably it's more like Crowley took inspiration from Nietzsche if he didn't even really follow what Nietzsche was writing anyways. I think too Crowley had it. Also, I don't think necessarily that that there's necessarily that much of a connection between Nietzsche and Darwin, at least not that I'm aware of.
It does. It does. It does. Because without Darwin destroying and evolution destroying the religious people of the time period, he brought humanity down out of the clouds like Socrates did. Because what Socrates did was he brought philosophy out of the clouds, out of the sky, out of the metaphysical, spherical motions of the sky, like the Pythagorean ideas about the musica universalis, and Socrates brought it down into the agora. He brought philosophy down to the people, and Nietzsche is doing the same thing. He saw himself as Socrates, but upgraded. It's similar because I made the comparison between Socrates and Darwin and how they both had a shattering effect on the societies that they were in, and Nietzsche is just basically capitalizing on the way that first Socrates destroyed the elites in Athens, and then now he's capitalizing on the fact that Darwin sufficiently undermined the religious belief system that his attack has never been solved. Essentially, like yes, there's some kind of a resurgence of religious belief systems now and metaphysical systems and whatever, especially in the aftermath of the discovery of the Nag Hammadi library documents and fragments. But especially Gnosticism seems to be having some kind of resurgence online. But I'm doing my best to figure it out to understand why. But in a sense, I would say that Socrates and Darwin had the same effect on their respective societies and time periods.
Yeah, well, Charles Darwin was he was a Freemason, so I think it's a lot in sort of the tradition of it's a lot of sort of esoteric people, producing new ideas.
I don't see any. It doesn't say that there's any. It doesn't say any evidence that Charles Darwin was a Freemason. While his grandfather Erasmus Darwin, who's also an interesting character, if you ever want to discuss him, because people don't know anything about this time period except those of us who have no life and a lot of free time to spend reading about Scotland and about the Enlightenment. Erasmus Darwin was a member of the Canongate Quillen Lodge in Scotland. Charles Darwin's name does not appear on the official rolls. Some internet sources confuse him with his grandfather or make unsubstantiated claims. So I'm going to push back and say no, Charles Darwin was not a Mason. Yeah, but that's guilt by association. That's guilt by association. You can't do that. It has to be him being a member, being an initiated member. Otherwise, it's just guilt by association because that would mean that everybody whose parents are something are automatically something, and that's not how it works.
Though with Freemasonry, it's a little bit different. I would say, and I think I could speculate that probably he was part of some kind of occult order whose records we don't have access to, especially the grandfathers of Freemason. Yeah, I would suppose too that it was more of an occult order because occult and Hermeticism, like occult is the father of science. Like for example, a lot of the scientific advancements and whatnot that came in the Enlightenment came from like the so-called hidden college, which is basically like Rosicrucians. So I think the connection there is pretty strong. That sort of esoteric people were creating the science, and so science is always in a way parroting the what's in the occult, like the secret fire, for example. You don't cut someone open and literally find a campfire, but still in a metaphorical way, such an occult concept is correct. And you can even see with like
Yeah, some type of enlightenment brotherhood, but probably of the scientific nature, potentially Hermeticism, right? Because a lot of the scientists of the Enlightenment were inspired by the documents that flooded out of Constantinople after it was taken over by the Ottoman Empire. A lot of those documents from the humanism of the Enlightenment and the Renaissance era was fueled by the infusion of documents that flooded like the Yangtze River over flooding into the European mind.
yeah, absolutely, yeah, and even back in the old times. So it's just very, in my view, it's very nicely just evolved into scientists. I would say scientists actually are probably into the occult behind the scenes. The first thing that comes to mind is like software engineers microdosing in Silicon Valley. Um,
Science and magic are like this. Science and magic are like this, man. They're not actually that distinguishable from each other. It's just a question of your understanding.
yeah, so I would say these things have always been connected, and so to make to distinguish between occult and science is sort of difficult. Like Rosicrucian orders are also using some of the tantric practices that I talked about earlier. So to me, it's all.
Well, they were the first scientists, right? They were the first, the mystics and the philosophers were the first scientists.
Yeah, like I was mentioning earlier that that I wanted to go back to a previous point that um, when I was saying about Crowley taking these things, he didn't actually steal the a lot of these tantric practices from the East. They are already imported into the Rosicrucian curriculums and such.
He didn't steal it. It was stolen fair and square. That doesn't make it not stolen. That doesn't make it not stolen. He just stole it from someone else who stole it. Okay. So he stole it. There's no honor among thieves, though. There's no honor among thieves.
So basically, a lot of the things like in the Golden Dawn curriculum, etc., are basically Eastern Tantra. Like if you draw a mind circle, that's Tantra basically. That's not. I haven't heard of that anywhere from a Western source. It's clear that it came from Tantra in the East, or perhaps the all of the practices came from Egypt before, as some people theorize. Like I have one friend that told me that she's but anyways, can't go into that too much, but um yeah, so I would say like Crowley isn't as far as his body of work, he's showing us a picture of sort of what is going on in the what is it the occult world anyways. So he just publicized it, a lot of it. He did some innovations from what I understand, but for the most part, it's just things the Rosicrucians have always already been doing for perhaps hundreds or thousands of years. Of course, Rosicrucians haven't been around that long, but maybe carried on from previous groups and whatnot. Um, I think that there perhaps have been some innovations in these groups, but I'm not exactly sure. Um, but that's sort of one of the reasons that I like Crowley, is because without him we wouldn't have Libra O. We wouldn't Israel Regardie wouldn't have published the Golden Dawn curriculum, and there's just a lot of these processes we wouldn't have. And this is really relevant to the concept of true will, of what is morality, because um, because my answer to true will is or to morality is true will, and so then it's like we can examine the person and the manifestation of what this true will is to some extent. But also, I think that these processes, or I know these processes expand the will to then sort of affect the world around you, which has some moral consequences.
Are you talking about, wait. Are you talking, when you when you say Western civilization is two components. It's Athens and Jerusalem. Without Athens, we are nothing. We have no secular knowledge, we have no science. Without Jerusalem, we have no mythos and we have no history. We need both of that's where a lot of people misunderstand. That's why I talked about earlier when I said that Aleister Crowley is merely invoking the ghost of Jerusalem. And the reason I said that is because that Athens is the place where secular knowledge was first produced in the world, okay? And Athens basically provides half of the alchemical mixture, whereas Jerusalem provides the other half, right? And you could argue that Egypt provides the foundation that all of these things sit on, essentially. Like, so it's a trifecta, but it definitely, or what's the word, tetrarchy, but it definitely has the elements that are the most important. I would say personally are Athens and Jerusalem. So without those two elements, we're nothing. So you can't, and I would say that you can't just eliminate Athens and you can't just eliminate Jerusalem and still have Western civilization. So what I'm referring to, I'm saying, which one are you referring to? Because there's two components to this alchemical mixture of political, philosophical, and scientific literature, belief systems, essentially.
Yeah, so I'm more interested in the Jerusalem part in that dichotomy. I wasn't, really aware of that. I think that's interesting. Yeah, that Jerusalem is it's two pieces, Athens and Jerusalem. Um, Jerusalem, I would say I'm about 80% on the side of Jerusalem.
Well, except for the fact that you still haven't addressed the fact that Nietzsche literally goes against everything that Aleister Crowley says, except that Aleister Crowley also like the true will is like a falsity. It's not true. It's fake. And Nietzsche like talks about this, but for some reason, like, so okay, so if okay, so your claim is that morality is relative, right? Yet you tether it to a fixed 20th century occultist system. That's not freedom, that's a dependency loop. Uh-huh. And if we are biological information, is your true will anything more than a metabolic urge? Why are we choosing to dress it up in Gnostic robes?
I mean, that's where like faith comes in. So, um, at some point, like when you're in love, how do you know you're in love? You don't know for sure logically. You just feel it. You just know. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's not that unnecessarily dressing things up. I think it's just more logical that um, the truth is relative, that morality is relative. It's not even necessarily completely tethered to Crowley. I just think that's the way it's always been. I mean, even talking about Jerusalem and Athens, their way of viewing things was very different than it is now. Um, through the Catholic Church, through the ages, I would say the progression of time within itself is a good argument for the fact that morality is relative.
Yeah, you're choosing. Yeah, you just made the categorical error. You just literally described what you're doing. You're putting yourself squarely in the camp of Jerusalem. As soon as you invoke faith or mythos, you're putting yourself in the Jerusalem camp, and then I'm placing myself in the Athenian camp because I'm with Nietzsche on this one. And I don't think that I think that faith is one component of the epistemological Western project, but it's only 50%. Like, you need faith or you can't be part of it, but you also need Athens, otherwise you can't be part of it. So you can't dismiss, like, that's why Nietzsche made a huge mistake. He tried to do the same thing that Wittgenstein did and tried to deny metaphysics and relegate it to obscurity, essentially, instead of dealing with it. So instead of Nietzsche and Wittgenstein and these others actually dealing with the bare bones aspects of metaphysics. They just reject the entire category entirely. So I find it very interesting that you're appealing to faith, which is exactly what I accused you of doing earlier, which is what I said Crowley was doing, which is appealing to the ghost of Jerusalem, which is insane because it literally shows you did exactly what I said you were going to do at the beginning. And I also see something else too. I wanted to bring up something that I don't know if you're aware of this, something called quantum occultism, but I'll let you respond first before I go into my quantum occultism spiel.
Yeah, so I'm more interested in the Jerusalem part and that dichotomy. I wasn't, really aware of that. I think that's interesting. Yeah, that Jerusalem is it's two pieces, Athens and Jerusalem. Um, Jerusalem, I would say I'm about 80% on the side of Jerusalem. Yeah, no, I mean, I wouldn't say that we don't need philosophy or logic. I would say I'm more like 80% in the realm of Jerusalem and that dichotomy. Um, yeah, I think faith is really the secret sauce in this. I think that without faith, like faith animates it. So maybe it's the 20 that does the 80 in my mind. But it's just my focus. It's what I do. I'm into metaphysics. I'm a mystic basically. So
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, like at least you're willing to say because a lot of people will actually lean 100% on Athens or 100% on Jerusalem, and I think that's an interdisciplinary mistake. I think that based on some of my other research, I think that it's important for the scientists to be educated in the classics, and I think it's important for the classicists to be educated in science. Anyway, so I would like to just address something with you that I think is extremely important that I stumbled upon during my investigations of Nietzsche and Aleister Crowley because they have a really interesting history that it seems like Crowley is actually very supportive of Nietzsche, and he doesn't straight up plagiarize him. He like credits him, which I think is very good because I mean, since like it would be hard for people in the time period not to know who Friedrich Nietzsche was because he was more important than Crowley and will always be more important than him. So it would make sense for Crowley to like attach himself to this like rising tide of Nietzschean values essentially. But a rising tide raises all boats. I wanted to ask you something first in terms of to identify whether or not you would be considered a quantum occultist. Are you ready? You're like, oh, damn it, he's doing this thing again. Okay, so are you gonna claim that the true will, is 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 a non-local phenomenon that transcends classical physics?
um, yeah, I would say like explain non-local. I suppose it's like I would say it's here. That's a tough one. That's a tough one to really piece apart because I can feel it here, but is it actually situated here, or is it situated in like the oversoul, or some other thing? I'm not exactly sure.
Well, I'm asking you if true will is local within the individual or non-local like the oversoul or the Geist or something like that that Hegel spoke of.
Yeah, I would say it transcends physics, or perhaps someday we'll get advanced enough to view what it is like. Yeah, like when we talked about the secret fire that animates all life.
Yeah, throw it back to Schrodinger, right? Dolores in the Schrodinger's box, basically. Is she there or is she not there? Yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Good idea. So quantum occultism is kind of a term that I'm kind of throwing together. And it basically refers to a term that Nietzsche referred to, but he said it in German. He called it the Hinterwelter, which is backworld strategy, where the gaps in quantum physics are used as a hiding place for the soul. So it's essentially like a God of the Gaps argument. It's an attempt to rescue 19th century spiritualism while dressing it up in 21st century terminology. So it's semantic hijacking, essentially. Sorry, semantic hijacking. It takes prescient terms and mathematical concepts like superposition, which you've probably heard me refer to, quantum entanglement, non-local observer effect, etc. And they'll try to resuscitate these terms or try to use them to like justify like old belief systems. And so it's basically the God of the Gaps 2.0 argument. Because the subatomic world is counterintuitive and spooky, the occultists assume that anything is possible. They treat the wave function not as a probability of matter, but as a permission slip for mysticism. So it becomes like an occultist's God of the Gaps argument. If you're aware of the God of the Gaps argument, that would be where Christians, mostly Christians, will attempt to say that wherever science is not, there be God. And this is basically the occultist's version. The quantum occultist is basically a God of the Gaps 2.0 person. And it's basically Neoplatonic camouflage. So you can thank your local philosopher providing people with this. It's a way of resuscitating the world of forms by claiming the true self is a non-local quantum energy. Seeking the seeker avoids the Darwinian reality that we are biological decay and entropy. They want to be a star. They want to be star seeds in a wave function because they can't handle being pond scum in a lab coat.
I don't take the whole quantum thing seriously. The thing is, we just don't know, and I think it's premature to be like, oh, this is what we're talking about. I think there's some semblance. I can't remember what exactly, but between which things, but I think there's some semblance or resemblance between quantum concepts and occult concepts. I don't think for me, I don't feel like it's to the point now where I should get excited about because I just don't know much about a lot. I just don't know a lot about quantum mechanics. I don't know enough to be comfortable making those kinds of assertions, and it's like, we don't. Science can't even tell us if eggs are healthy for us or not. I mean, not to say that, not to make. I'm making a joke about science, but not to say that every department of science is as mercurial as um, nutrition, but I just don't feel comfortable with it yet.
What? Say that again?
Yeah, well, I consider myself an Arcturian starseed. I identify as Korean. Lol. Yeah, no, but I think a lot of these things are true about aliens coming to Earth. Am I going to hinge my whole identity off of that? No, I do have one friend who's Arcturian, and there's a lot of similarities between us. Even our inner thoughts are very similar. I don't mean that.
Oh, I thought you said a Korean. I was like, damn, I didn't know you were Korean like that. Oh wait, you're pushing back on Nietzsche and you're like, no, Nietzsche, you fool. I am a quantum occultist of the highest order, and not only that, I am a star seed of the most rare variety. Yeah, I mean that's what you just said. I just made it sound better.
Yeah, I mean, like mysticism, the work of mystics and whatnot. I think religion is more powerful than science in a lot of ways. Science, it's like, oh, what we observe just directly through experimentation. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think there's an element of faith in it with this sort of thing. Philosophy. It comes from somewhere, and with good faith, we need to understand that, absorb it, and apply it. And I think we can just all feel that there's more to it. There's something more there.
Yeah, because you're a continental. You're a continental, not an analytical thinker. That's why you're a continental like me. I'm not an analytical thinker either. You're not a Wittgenstein. You're a Plato. You're not a Wittgenstein. Yeah. You don't refer to science as the authority that you appeal to. You appeal to a higher authority, right? Just like Plato.
Yeah, it's new ground. I don't know. I don't feel like I need to digest it now and make a rash sort of assertion about it. You know, it's just I don't really think anything about it almost. You know, I'm interested in it. I'm excited to see what comes of it, but you know, for the most part, I'm just not sure about where it's going at the moment.
Yeah, that's appropriate. Don't be too excited. Don't listen to people who tell you about quantum superstates justifying their personal metaphysics because it's too personalized, right? Like I look at this stuff and I say, you know what? It's proving to me that I know nothing. It doesn't confirm my delusions, it challenges my beliefs.
Yeah, I think that the other thing is that esoterics bring us sort of a picture of the world. You know, it's metaphorically true, but the metaphor can almost be more true than the scientific truth in a way. Like, for example, the um, there's a deep occult concept of the hidden fire within all of us, the hidden fire that animates all life, and you know, it's not like you cut someone open to see a campfire. It's more like, you know, like you're on fire all the time. You're warm, you know, you're metabolizing. You're literally burning. Even the stomach acid, it's a liquid, right? It's I wouldn't exactly say it's fire, but like Vedically, it'd be considered fire. The stomach and the stomach. Um, you know, and that's what's and it literally is animating your body, but you know, so it's an obtuse in an obtuse way. The secret fire is a reality, um, you know, and so but I think this is something where a lot of occult concepts, some of them have been proven to be correct, like that the universe is always in motion. Um, but yeah, I think a lot of these concepts, perhaps science will catch up and show, but it might not be exactly what we think. But even if it's not, you know, what we think, it's still like, still I think metaphysics is right about a lot of things.
So what you said about the fire thing actually goes all the way back to Heraclitus. And in 535 BC to 475 BC, he was pre-Socrates. He proposed fire is the primary fundamental substance and governing principle of the cosmos. He believed world is an ever-living fire in a state of constant orderly flux, perpetually kindling and extinguishing, symbolizing the unity of opposites and eternal change. So what you described is doing justice to Heraclitus in a way. And I don't know if Heraclitus, maybe he had some experience with Eastern mysticism and that's where he got it from, but he's one of the first to talk about flux and change and fire being the principal constituent elements of reality.